Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 2, Text 53. Tribhuvana vibhava hetavepi akunta. Smritir ajitatma suradir bir vimrigyat. Na chalati bhagavat pachara vindaya. Lavani sardam apiya sarvaishnava kriya. Tribhuvana vibhavaheta vepi akunta. Smritir ajitatma suradibir vimrigyat. Na chalati bhagavat padaravinda. Lavani misandam apiya sa Vaishnavagriya. Tribhuvana vipavaheta vepi akunta. Smritir ajitatma suradipir vimrigyat. Na chalati bhagavat padaravinda. Lavani misartam apiya sa Vaishnavagriya. Very good. Please chant. Tribhuvana vipavaheta vepi akunta. Smritir ajitatma suradibir vimrigyat. Na chalati bhagavat padaravinda. Lavani misardam apiya sa Vaishnavagriya. Tribhuvana vipavaheta vepi akunta. Smritir ajitatma suradibir virmigyat. Na chalati bhagavat padaravinda. Lavani mishadam apiya sa Vaishnavagriya. Tribhuvana vipavaheta vepi akunta. Smriti rajitatma suradibir vimrigyat. Na chalati bhagavat paravinda. Lavani misardam apiya sa Vaishnavagriya. Thank you very much. And the word for word, Tribhuvana, of the three worlds comprising the material universe. Vibhavahetave, for the sake of the opulences. Api, even. Akunta, smriti, whose remembrance is undisturbed. Ajita Atma, of whom the unconquerable Lord is the very soul. Sura Adibi, by the demigods and others. vimrigyat, which are sought. Na chalati, he does not go away. Bhagavat, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pada aravindai, from the lotus feet. Lava, of 8/45 of 1 second. Nimisa, or of 3 times that. Ardham, 1/2. Api, even. Ya, who. Sa, he. Vaishnava Agriya, the foremost of devotees of Lord Vishnu. And the translation, a BBT translation for this text 53. So, of course, this is one of the Yogendras, the second of the 9 Yogendras speaking. The lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are sought even by the greatest of demigods, such as Brahma and Shiva, who have all accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their life and soul. A pure devotee of the Lord can never forget those lotus feet in any circumstance. He will not give up his shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord for a single moment. Indeed, not for half a moment, even in exchange for the benediction of ruling and enjoying the opulence of the entire universe. Such a devotee of the Lord is to be considered the best of the Vaishnavas. And this is the BBT purport, so the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, one may ask, quote, if one were able to gain the opulence of the entire universe in exchange for leaving the Lord's lotus feet for just half a moment, what would be the harm in leaving the Lord's lotus feet for such an insignificant amount of time, close quote. The answer is given by the word akunta smriti. It is simply impossible for a pure devotee to forget the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, since everything that exists is in fact an expansion of the Supreme Lord. Since nothing is separate from the Supreme Lord, a pure devotee of the Lord cannot think of anything but the Lord. Nor can a pure devotee contemplate ruling or enjoying universal opulences, even if given all the opulence of the universe. He would immediately offer it at the lotus feet of the Lord and return to his position of a humble servant of the Lord. The words Achitatma Suradibir Vimnigyat are very significant in this verse. The lotus feet of Lord Krishna are so opulent that even the lords of all material opulence, namely Brahma and Shiva, as well as the other demigods, are always searching for a glimpse of the Lord's lotus feet. The word Vimnigyat indicates that the demigods are not actually able to see the lotus feet of the Lord, but are endeavoring to see them. An example of this is given in the 10th canto when Lord Brahma offers prayers to Vishnu, begging the Lord to rectify the disturbances on the earth. A similar verse is found elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:14. Na parameshtayam na mahendra dishnyam na sarvabhoman na rasadipipatyam na yoga siddhir apunar bhavam va mai arpitat mechat mat vinanyat. Quote, the devotee who has offered his soul to me does not want anything if it is separate from me. Not the position of the supreme demigod of the universe, Brahma, nor that of Lord Indra, nor kinship over the entire earth or over the lower planetary systems, nor the mystic perfections of yoga, nor even freedom from the cycle of rebirth. Close quote. the translation for 11.14.14. So according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the word ajitatma can also be taken to mean ajichendriya, or, quote, those whose senses are uncontrolled, close quote. Although the demigods are all to be respected as devotees of Lord Vishnu, the absence of gross material discomfort in the higher planetary systems makes them tend to become affected by the bodily concept of life. And sometimes they experience some spiritual difficulty due to the gorgeous material facilities available to them. Such disturbances, however, cannot exist within the mind of a pure devotee of the Lord, as indicated in this verse by the word akunta smriti. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we can understand from this verse that since none of the material facilities available in any of the universal planetary systems can distract a pure devotee of the Lord, such a devotee can never possibly fall or become inimical to the Lord's service. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagan Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindava Ishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Taribhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimata Ram Padaswami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation once again for a refresher. So the second of the 9 Yogendras speaking to King Nimi. The lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are sought even by the greatest of demigods such as Brahma and Shiva, who have all accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their life and soul. A pure devotee of the Lord can never forget those lotus feet in any circumstance. He will not give up his shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord for a single moment, indeed, not for half a moment, even in exchange for the benediction of ruling and enjoying the opulence of the entire universe. Such a devotee of the Lord is to be considered the best of the Vaishnavas. So in looking at this particular verse, I thought to turn to Srila Prabhupada's definition of perfect Krishna consciousness. So here it is. To understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor of Krishna without falsely claiming this material body to be oneself and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. So that understanding on the part of someone in this perfect stage of Krishna consciousness is a knowing that Krishna is the owner, the proprietor of everything, and that everything must be used for the satisfaction of Krishna. So there's a notion of fittingness, you could say, or appropriateness in an individual determining what is right or wrong, according to how the person chooses to live. So the example Srila Prabhupada gives is of Arjuna, who on a personal level didn't want to fight. But when he became fully Krishna conscious, these are Srila Prabhupada's words, he fought because Krishna wanted him to fight. So an individual may take into account the effect of his actions on others initially when deciding what is right or wrong. And Arjuna argued, this was Arjuna's argument, because you see, you have to approach the world with what your understanding is and what you know. So before we do something, we're going to stand and think, okay, what's right and what's wrong? And often we'll think, what's the effect going to be on somebody else? So Arjuna, he argued in this way. So this is an example of that kind of, deciding what action are you going to take? So Arjuna argued this way. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, or happiness. So he's thinking about the effect on everybody else, and he's also thinking about the effect on himself. I mean, after doing such killing, how can he actually want any kingdom? How can he actually think about happiness? So that was from Bhagavad Gita 131, where Arjuna is thinking what course of action is he going to take? And he further reasons. So he says, oh, Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they may otherwise kill me? O maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will I derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? So you can see that careful deliberation of what is the effect going to be on others through the action that I perform. And of course, it goes back to what is the effect going to be on myself. So that was an example of Arjuna's thinking. So that's from Bhagavad Gita in chapter 132 through 35. So in the case of Arjuna deciding what is right to do, he took into account the harm that was going to be caused to others, meaning bringing about their death, and the consequence for his own family. So this is Srila Baladev Vijayabhusan who's phrasing Arjuna's thinking. So Arjuna is thinking like this, I have no desire to kill them, even if they attack me. Even if I attain a kingdom of the three worlds, what to speak of attaining just this earth? So he's reasoning. He's not having that desire to perform this action. Even if it's going to have this very positive effect of gaining an entire kingdom, and he says even if he was going to gain the three worlds, he still wouldn't do it. What to speak of just getting the earth or sovereignty over the earth. So, having killed Duryodhana and others, what peace would we Pandavas have who remain here? None at all. It is not proper to kill brothers for a temporary semblance of happiness that will lead to long-term suffering in hell. O Janardana, so he's using the word Janardana, which means destroyer of people when he's talking to Krishna. If they are to be killed, then you who have come to relieve the earth of its burden should kill them. It is not possible for you, the Supreme Lord, to suffer the effects of sin at all in killing them. So he's thinking of a solution. And this is Srila Baladev Vijayapu's son, phrasing how Arjuna is articulating his reasoning process. So he's thinking that basically he will be committing a great sin. So therefore, the result of that sin will be actually living in a hellish condition. So he's thinking, what could be the solution? Well, Krishna doesn't get the reaction of sin, so maybe he should be the one who's doing the killing. So Lord Krishna explains, and this was Arjuna's concern, there's not going to be any peace for himself and his brothers, the Pandavas. And if we look at this idea, because we're looking at how one makes a decision for an action one's going to perform, the effect on others, and also the consequence for oneself and one's fellow persons that are close to one. So Lord Krishna explains how real peace is achieved. And this is closely related to knowing who is the proprietor of everything. So that's what has to be kept in mind when one is thinking of making a decision for a course of action. Krishna is the proprietor of everything. So here's how Krishna explains it, of how you actually, in the action you perform, you'll come to a state of peace. So here's Krishna's explanation. It's from Bhagavad Gita 2:72. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. So there's a long list of things that have to be out of the picture in making any decision of how to act. You don't have a sense of proprietorship. You don't have a sense of your ego and wanting to assert your ego. And also, you have an understanding that you want to try and live free from any desire. So this is a very interesting explanation by Lord Krishna, because obviously it's quite complex if one's going to make this kind of decision that's actually going to allow one to be peaceful, because those are quite high standards or quite big criteria to be met. So that was from Bhagavad Gita 2:72. So Srila Prabhupada, he makes a distinction, because one of the things one looks at is this idea of living free from desires. Like generally, the mind has got desire after desire after desire. So Srila Prabhupada, he makes this distinction. One does not put an end to desires, but rather develops a desire to satisfy Krishna. Thus, a person cannot be, you could say, desireless. It's not possible. Or you cannot be without your senses that are looking for some satisfaction in some way. But a person can change the quality of his or her desires. So that's the very interesting distinction that needs to be borne in mind when one's thinking of this idea of desires. A person who is materially desireless, like not actually wanting anything material, is the person who knows that everything belongs to Krishna. Because that's the personality that's been discussed here by the second of the 9 Yogendras to King Nimi. This person who actually is materially desireless. So you can understand that a person who is materially desireless, who actually literally doesn't have these desires coming one after the other in the mind, is a person who knows, who factually knows that everything belongs to Krishna. So And to understand this deeper, we can look at in Sri Upanishad, Mantra 1, which explains, I'll read the Sanskrit first. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunita ma grita kashya sadanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within this universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one must not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. I remember one nice devotee one day was saying to me, how do you know when you've got enough? And this is very interesting because I find myself thinking about this generally when I'm making decisions if I'm going to acquire some material object. I think, okay, what purpose will it serve in my life? Will it fulfill a purpose and will it have a use? And do I have anything that can serve that purpose or fulfill that use already? If I do not, and it is a genuine purpose that will serve, well and good. But I'm not going to get 2 of the same kind or 3 of the same kind. So that way one comes to understand when one has enough, because you're making a deep consideration before acquiring something. So this is that, bearing in mind that principle that's put in Sri Upanishad, that one only takes things that are necessary for oneself, because one understands that everything belongs to the Lord. So you just take what is your quota, what is for your needs. That's it. So this is a means that was employed by a person such as Maharaj Parikshit, because he's described by Srila Sutta Goswami as having, and this is the description, quote, from Srimad Bhagavatam 292. So this very great personality. This is Sutta Goswami describing a personality who functioned in this careful kind of way. He was able to give up all deep-rooted affection for his personal body, his wife, his children, his palace, his animals like horses and elephants, his treasure house, his friends and relatives, and his undisputed kingdom. He was actually able to give them up. So the reason he could be free from these material attachments was by the grace of Lord Krishna. So it means that when one's acting with the understanding that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, then when one's making one's decisions of how to act, what to acquire, for instance, one is actually conscious that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, and so actually it has to serve a purpose in one's life. So therefore, the purpose is served, but one is actually not attached to those items because one knows who they belong to. So Srila Prabhupada, he puts it this way. This is that position of the pure devotee of Lord Krishna, because we're examining this kind of personality that's been described by the second of the 9 Yogendras. So this is that position of the pure devotee of Lord Krishna, and Maharaj Parikshit is that example. So there was a nice discussion when I was looking at this particular verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam 262, describing Maharaj Parikshit. So there was a long explanation by Srila Prabhupada where we're saying, like in the modern day, you don't have horses and elephants because basically it's been replaced by cars and maybe other conveyances that you have to pay for to utilize if you have to go super long distances. But it's maybe a little bit easier because you may not get attached to a car in the same way as you may get attached perhaps to a horse or an elephant because they're living beings, so it's different. But at any rate, so the explanation of the changing quality of desire, because that was how Srila Prabhupada explained it, that those desires that are incessantly in the mind, one has to change the quality of those desires. So Maharaj Parikshit, due to his affection for Lord Krishna as a devotee of the Lord, he was always executing his royal duties on behalf of the Lord. And as a responsible king of the world, he was always careful. So this is how he was operating. When he was deciding how to make a decision to function in the world, he was careful to see that the influence of Kali was not entering his kingdom. So, that greed for wealth, acquisition, he was careful to see that that was not happening in his kingdom. So the means for doing that, of course, is that he's serving as a perfect example where he's just utilizing what he has to utilize, but he's detached from those material objects because he's understanding this belongs to Lord Krishna. So he's serving as a perfect example and he's helping all his citizens to function in that kind of way. So this kind of transcendental knowledge is, of course, based on self-realization because you're working towards a goal to come closer to Krishna and to love Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada, the owner of everything, and Srila Prabhupada defines this understanding, knowing perfectly well that every living entity is eternally a part and parcel of Krishna. So it goes even deeper, being able to function in this kind of exemplary way of this perfect devotee. One has to carry that understanding that every living entity is part and parcel of Lord Krishna in terms of their spiritual identity. So there is simultaneously individuality and identity in Krishna. So this is the transcendental knowledge that equips one to make steady progress on the path of liberation from material functioning. So you can see how important it is what understanding you're carrying, how it's actually going to affect the decisions you're making. So one who's fully in Krishna consciousness is washed clean of any misgivings, means that person is actually understanding that Krishna truly is the owner of everything, and that person is understanding that truly every living entity is a part and parcel of Krishna. So they have a spiritual identity with Krishna. So that person is in perfect knowledge of all things of transcendence. So I'm breaking this down because this particular verse today is looking at a personality who's in that position. And Lord Krishna explains, when one's intelligence, mind, and faith and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. So it's very extraordinary. Everything is focused on Lord Krishna, the intelligence, the mind, faith. And then you could say that person doesn't have any misgivings. They understand. They're functioning with that knowledge. So there's no misgivings. So they just headed for being liberated from being caught up in this material cycle of birth and death and material acquisitions, which was one of the points brought up today, particularly the acquisition part. And Srila Jiva Goswami, in commenting on today's text, he says, this personality who's in that position, that he's carrying this knowledge and he's acting on it, is not lured. So there's no temptation of wanting dominion over the three worlds. because that's a huge allurement. And especially because, in the Bhagavatam, we're reading a lot about kings, very saintly kings who actually had that position. So particularly, Srila Jiva Goswami is commenting that they're not lured by dominion over the three worlds, because that's a temptation for a very strong administrative personality. They want greater and greater control. So control of the three worlds, that could be very tempting, but they're not allured by that. So rhetorically, Srila Jiva Goswami raises this question: does he waver? Meaning that personality in that position carrying that knowledge, does he waver? And the answer is no. But rather, his remembrance does not decrease in the least regarding the Lord's lotus feet. That was the word akunta smriti. His remembrance doesn't decrease. It's always there. He is absorbed in the Lord. So such persons have had a vision of the truth, have had all their doubts destroyed, have controlled their minds, and are engaged in the welfare of all beings and attain paramatma and liberation. So recently, just looking at this, these kind of personalities, one of the things that one will witness, because I get exposed to my spiritual master, and one thing that's been coming very strongly in my mind recently is that all the actions that are performed are for the welfare of everyone. And this, it keeps striking me. Recently, I find myself thinking a lot about this. Every action is for the welfare of someone. And I get some of that kind of action coming towards me even. Like when I was in the early, maybe 9 years ago in this temple, when I started doing these Bhagavatam classes, along my spiritual master immediately sends me commentaries by the Goswamis. So, there's always that looking for the welfare of someone. So something to assist me in the work being performed. So, and that's just one example. There's many others. So these personalities are not only acting for the welfare of every living being, they actually have their minds completely controlled. They don't have any doubts, and they have a vision of the truth. That's the particular explanation that's given, or the summary that's given by Srila Jiva Goswami. So there's a motto for any person who's seeking perfection in Krishna consciousness. And Krishna told Arjuna this: go on fighting, but keep me in your heart. So that's the motto. Go on fighting, but keep Krishna in the heart. Because it's actually not an easy thing, the process of Krishna consciousness. And here's a very nice, soft way that Queen Suniti told her very young son how to go about this process of bhakti yoga, or this whole system that then leads to this elevated position where there's no doubt anymore in the heart. One is just looking for the welfare of every living entity. So this is how she tells her little son: my dear boy, you also should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's very kind to his devotees. Persons seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Being purified by executing your allotted occupation, just situate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your heart, and without deviating for a moment, engage always in his service. So I thought that was very relevant, that very beautiful advice that Queen Suniti was giving to her young princely son, that it required placing Lord Krishna in the heart and just proceeding with the services one has to perform. And particularly Queen Suniti, she pointed to the fact that no one may be able to mitigate one's misery, to sort of put an end to one's misery. But Krishna is able to help the devotee because that's part of the misery. That's why the deep consideration that's given when one has to perform an action. What is the effect going to be on others? What's the consequence going to be for oneself? So it's such a difficult thing to do, but with carrying that understanding that, okay, if I'm functioning, understanding that everything belongs to Krishna, that all these persons have a spiritual identity in relation to Krishna, it sort of makes one, puts one in a much more protected position, because the other way, there's always some misery that's going to result. And so Krishna is able to help the devotee. So naturally, we find ourselves sometimes in very difficult circumstances, just with the workings of the world, because not everybody's walking around with the understanding that everything belongs to Krishna, every single person is related to Krishna. So not walking around with that knowledge means that the ego is operating, the mind is operating, so there's a need to assert oneself, to actually acquire more, to be important, etc. So naturally, one may find oneself in all kinds of very uncomfortable situations, but Krishna is able to help the devotee. And this was Queen Suniti's advice with telling her little son to put Krishna in the heart. Basically, he's the one who can mitigate one's miseries. And this is the process. Although it's not easy, it's sought by great sages who are advanced in self-realization. And as soon as one places the Lord within one's heart, everything becomes easy and successful. So those were some thoughts that came from this particular verse that's painting the picture of that very perfect devotee who doesn't have any doubts in the heart of Krishna's position, is functioning all the time with this knowledge that Krishna is the proprietor of everything. They don't have any doubts in their mind anymore. So that was the breakdown. If there's something to expand the discussion, please feel free. Get the microphone because it's been recorded.
So Mataji, you said keeping Krishna in the heart. That means we have to think of Krishna all the time. Is that right?
So the question is, keeping Krishna in the heart, that means one has to think of Krishna all the time. Well, it's usually not possible to do that unless one has sadhana practices. And just by actually performing sadhana, Krishna is within the heart. So he's there constantly because one has connected with him and is actually engaging in the prescribed process of chanting his holy name on a daily basis for a set number of rounds. That allows Krishna to be there. So it's just natural as one's going through one's day, by virtue of the fact that one's performed the sadhana and connected to Krishna, he's very much in the consciousness. So it's not even that one deliberately even has to think of. He's just there because of the austerity one's performing of connecting with him through the sadhana practices, through his chanting his holy name.
So then how long is that process going to take to bring Krishna in the heart? Would that depend on your past karma, on how much you have to cut down your negative karmas until you keep doing your sadhana so that you get the benefits of the good things that you do?
Yeah, it's devotional life is so different from, say, the Karmakanda section, where Karmakanda section of the Vedas is saying, okay, if you want this benefit, you perform this austerity or this sacrifice. So devotional life is not like that. It's actually that one is equipped with the understanding that you are eternally connected to Lord Krishna as his servitor. So everything you perform is going to be for his pleasure. So it's a different mindset. It's not the mindset of, okay, if I do this, I'm going to get that. It's the mindset of, I actually want to perform my actions to please Lord Krishna. So if one's functioning with that mindset and carrying that knowledge that in fact that's the appropriate and correct way to function, because after all everything belongs to him, he's the controller of everything, one is eternally related to him in terms of being a servitor, then functioning in that kind of way, by his grace, one is actually granted freedom from the suffering that is just so much a part of this world, its functioning, and also the suffering that you brought up that may be, karmic reactions that one has to experience. By his grace, he's actually kindly allowing one to understand how that karmic reaction, if it's there, is going to assist one to become a better person, to understand better what one needs to overcome in oneself in terms of the way one's viewing the world or the way one is viewing oneself. So there's got to be a lot of internal work of reflection and analysis, and it's only made possible by virtue of the fact that Lord Krishna is bestowing his grace upon one and allowing one to see. So if it is a karmic reaction, one is then going to be viewing it very differently. One is going to be viewing it through Krishna conscious eyes. Oh, what is it that I can actually, what is Krishna allowing me to understand of myself? What quality am I lacking? What is it that I need to improve in my outlook or my functioning? So it's a completely different outlook and result and intervention on the part of Krishna compared to if you were just performing some austerity sacrifice with a mentality to gain something. It's very different. The whole dynamic is completely different.
So the service has to be spontaneous in doing it for Krishna, and then Krishna reciprocates accordingly.
Yeah, I don't know about spontaneous. It can be thoughtful. It can be very thoughtful that even simple things that one's performing. I mean, that's what's said in the Vedas. Simple things like even one's eating, one's sleeping, everything is thought about carefully, and one tries to do it for the pleasure of Krishna. So, cooking could just be a thing of, oh, I'm now going to satisfy my body, but it's not like that. Because one's performing with the consciousness that it's for pleasing Krishna, then one actually does cooking very beautifully. Very nice dishes are prepared because it's going to be for the pleasure of Krishna. So you're raising your consciousness all the time. So it's not so much about spontaneity, it's about deliberately performing actions that are there to please Krishna. So one is doing one's very best. One is thinking a great deal how to actually make something very nice. So it's not so much spontaneous, it's very deliberate and very thoughtful.
Thank you so much, Mother.
Yeah, and the last part that you had brought up, which was, how long does it take? Well, it all has to do with the grace of Krishna and also one's application of what one has been given, the mind one's been given, the intelligence one's been given, and the body one's been given. How one is utilizing it with that care and the deliberateness, and then Krishna's grace upon one. So that's the dynamic that's there. So you can't really put a time frame around it, because after all it's Krishna's grace. and the capacity one has and the sincerity one has with which one applies oneself.
Thank you, Mataji. One realization I had in this Kali Yuga, it's more harder to practice or to do our sadhana, um, given all the distractions we have, the hurdles we have, than when in the previous ages, and more so for grihasthas, where your duties, you have so many duties for your family members. I think it is harder. I could be wrong, but I was just thinking about it.
That it's not as easy as it may have been in other yugas.
Yeah.
No, actually, I mean, that's why the example is used throughout the Bhagavatam. All the examples of these great saintly kings. So imagine the level of responsibility of a king. I mean, it's overseeing the spiritual well-being of an entire kingdom. Not only the immediate family members.
No, you're right.
Overseeing the, you could say, economic development of the entire kingdom through, maintaining the treasury well. The particular I guess also relations with neighboring countries. So it's a very broad responsibility. So then one could say, okay, was that responsibility made easier because it was in an age that was more in goodness? The mode of goodness was operating and people were more inclined to spiritual life. But here in this present time, everybody's inclined towards quarreling. I mean, that's the inclination. It's quarreling. And the mode of passion of achieving and outdoing somebody else. So does that mean that actually it's much more difficult in the present time? Or do we have more duties? Or it seems like we have more duties because of that kind of climate? So it's an interesting consideration. And you could then think, well, just think how extraordinary it is that there's the right process that's given for self-realization in each age. So in a previous age, it may have been through deity worship. So very mode of goodness. So the self-realization is through deity worship. So in the present time, with this mode of passion and ignorance, the method that's given is the sadhana practice, so going internal, going completely internal. So you actually are having to conquer your mind. Your own mind is what is actually creating the difficulty. So it's not so much the preponderance of duties, but rather the, and you could say, of course, the particular environment of passion and ignorance operating very strongly, but rather it's the one's own mind that is causing a huge problem in how one is looking at everything, because there's the mode of passion and ignorance, and so one is influenced that way, and one's ego is very strong. I've got to do better than everybody else. I've got to achieve, etc. I mean, it's the general thinking. I've got to have the best education, whatever it is. It's I've got to outdo others. That's the mode of passion and ignorance operating. So because the emphasis or the process that's being given is on chanting, which is internally making the connection with Lord Krishna, and internally this is giving that opportunity to reflect on how one's mind is functioning, how one's intelligence needs to be shifted. It's actually perfect for this age. Because as opposed to focusing externally, one's going internal. So it's a perfect process for this age, and it's, again, not so much that it appears that one is in a more difficult situation than in past ages, but rather that the process is correct for this age, going internal. So, yeah, it's actually very wonderful because one realizes that it actually is possible to start to quiet the mind. And it is such a boon to have an opportunity to refine one's intelligence through the availability of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and the beautiful examples, instructions, dialogues that take place. It's and then reflect on how it can be applied in one's own life, and yeah, it's a perfect process for this age.
Krishna is so kind. He comes in this Kali Yuga as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to give us this process of chanting the holy name.
Yeah, it's very radical when you think about it. I mean, many persons spend their lives going to therapists because there's awareness that the mind is so difficult to control and manage. And there's all the impressions from this life, past lives, disturbing impressions. So persons are getting therapy through their lives. But here is the perfect process for, in this disturbed environment, with the disturbance in one's own mind from karmic impressions, whenever that one is carrying, one is actually getting an opportunity through indeed the kindness of Lord Chaitanya to have this very extraordinary direct access to Lord Krishna and his extreme kindness. And that's Queen Suniti's putting that emphasis on his great kindness. So it's by his kindness, whatever difficulties are there, they're actually minimized. And somehow he finds a way to actually allow one to grow and yeah, the term that's always used is purifying one's existence. It means that you're discarding all the unwanted, ugly things, the way the mind, those impressions of the mind, the egoistical way of trying to outdo others, all that starts to get discarded because one has been given this beautiful process of directly coming into the presence of Lord Krishna and directly receiving his care and protection. It's very extraordinary. Very extraordinary.
Taji, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very, very kind attention. And maybe the class is a little broad. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.